Hello, it's Daddy again. It's reading time, and our next book or story is a very exciting one. And I know that both of you, Suhani and Suniti, will enjoy it very much. And it might be one that even Dada and Grandma really enjoy too. It's called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Two Hearts as One. You know, it's been a while since we've tickled Grandma's feet, so let's do that right now. Quickly! Okay. Snow White leaned down to kiss her husband and the prince. "I'll be back soon, dear," she said. "I will miss you," said the prince. Snow White sang happily as she headed toward the seven dwarfs' cottage. So much had happened since that long ago day when the forest animals had led her there. The evil queen was gone, and Snow White lived happily with her prince. Soon they would celebrate their first wedding anniversary. Snow White could hardly believe it. "Hello, hello," Snow White called out to the seven dwarfs as they ran to greet her. Even Grumpy couldn't hide his delight. "I have a special favor to ask you," said Snow White. "The prince and I will soon celebrate our first year together. I would like to make him dinner, but no one at the palace would let me cook. They don't know what they're missing," Grumpy exclaimed. Snow White smiled. "So I wondered if I could make dinner for him here tomorrow night, and I want to give him a special gift, something that could add to his family shield." We're going to have a family shield. "Like a diamond?" asked Doc. "Don't you worry, Snow White, I'll take care of it myself. Take care of it myself." "Oh, thank you so much," she said. "We'll meet her tomorrow evening." After Snow White left, Grumpy turned to Doc and said, "So you don't think the rest of us can find a diamond good enough for Snow White?" "We'll see about that." Grumpy stomped off. All night he planned which part of the mine he would search to find the perfect diamond. He planned for so long that the next morning he overslept. The others were gone when he woke up. He rushed out the door and ran right into the prince. "Well, hello, Grumpy," said Prince. "I'm glad to find you at home. I have a favor to ask you." The prince continued, "Grumpy, I love Snow White so much that I want to give her the most precious gift I can to celebrate our anniversary. I am having a crown made for her, and I would like to find the most beautiful, most perfect diamond to set in the center of it." Grumpy couldn't believe his ears. The prince was asking him to find a gift for Snow White. Why, if that doesn't beat finding a gift for Snow White to give to the prince, he'd eat his hat. Grumpy puffed up his chest proudly. "I'll find the most beautiful, most sparkling, most dazzling diamond in the whole mine," he cried. They agreed to meet later that evening. Meanwhile, deep in the mine, Doc had found his perfect diamond, even in the dim light of the mine. The diamond twinkled like a star. Doc hurried off to tell other dwarfs and to find a pickaxe to remove the gem. But Grumpy had also rushed deep into the mine. He turned a corner and stopped. There was the most beautiful, most sparkling, and the most dazzling diamond in the whole mine. It was the exact same diamond that Doc had found, but Grumpy didn't know that. He didn't want to smudge it, so he hurried off to find a sack for it. Dopey whistled a little tune to himself. He had been wandering through the whole mine himself looking for the perfect diamond for Snow White. And there it was, and it was the very same diamond that Doc and Grumpy had chosen. Carefully, Dopey dislodged the diamond with the pickaxe. Doc, Grumpy, and the other dwarfs hurried back to the perfect diamond. When they got there, they saw Dopey with his pickaxe and diamond. "Dopey!" they shouted. Dopey looked up. His pickaxe slipped and hit the diamond. Faster than you can say perfect and precious, the diamond was broken into two pieces. "No!" cried Doc and Grumpy. They rushed over and each picked up a piece. "I was going to give it to the prince for Snow White," said Grumpy. "Well, I was going to give it to Snow White for the prince," said Doc. Far above them at the mine's entrance, the end of the day whistle blew. "It can't be that late already," cried Doc. "What will we do? Snow White will be waiting for us when we get home." "So will the prince," said Grumpy. Doc sighed. We'll just have to explain. Grumpy and Doc each put their half into a bag. On the way home, Dopey found some vines to tie the bag shut. At the Seven Dwarfs' cottage, Snow White had just set the table for their anniversary dinner. The prince handed her a beautiful bouquet of flowers and kissed her on the cheek. Snow White wanted to tell him that his dinner was only part of the present, but she was smiled and waited for Dwarfs to return. The prince ate at his home-cooked meal slowly, enjoying every bite. Still, as he ate, the prince wondered what was keeping the seven dwarfs. Perhaps they didn't want to disturb Snow White's special dinner. The prince looked down the path that led to the diamond mine, and one more time. He couldn't wait to give Snow White her diamond. Snow White and the prince were just finishing their pie when the dwarfs returned. Snow White smiled at Doc. The prince smiled at Grumpy. Doc carefully set his bag in front of Snow White, while Grumpy gave his to the prince. Snow White and the prince looked at each other in surprise. "This is the other part of my presents," said Snow White. She touched the bag. The prince handed Snow White the other bag. "We must think alike," he said. "This is my present for you. It's for your crown. I hope you like it." Snow White opened the bag. The prince's eye widened when he saw the broken diamond. Grumpy crumbled his cap and frowned. "Oh, darling, how unusual," said Snow White as she held up the diamond half. "Yes," said the prince, disappointed, "unusual." "And I have something for you," Snow White beamed as she handed the prince her bag. The prince carefully let the diamond drop into his hand. "Oh my!" cried Snow White. She looked quickly at Doc, then down at her plate. The prince squeezed Snow White's hand. "It's beautiful, my dear, because it is from you." Then Dopey began playing the sweet tune of his flute. He came over to the table and pointed to Snow White's diamond and the prince's diamond. "Yes, they are beautiful, Dopey," said Snow White. She patted his arm. Dopey shook his head and pointed to each of the pieces. Again, he looked at the prince. "I'm sorry," said the prince. "I don't understand." Dopey set down his flute. He reached for the prince's diamond. Then he picked up Snow White's diamond. And as the prince and Snow White watched, he joined the two separate pieces into a perfect heart. The next evening at the anniversary ball, Snow White did not wear her new crown. The prince did not display his family shield. Instead, they placed the two pieces of diamond side by side. Snow White and the prince danced the night away as the beautiful diamond sparkled and shone. The end. And of course, we know what this means now. It's time for bed. It's time to give everyone a hug and a kiss and say goodnight in Jessamnan. And we also need to brush our teeth, clear all the buggies out, and then go into our big girl beds for bed so we can then wake up happy. Jessamnan, and I love you.